For me and the Lord, we got an understanding.
We're on a mission from God.
They shouldn't have given you ashy blokes YouTube.
Cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken, for the dust we are. And to the dust we shall return.
I'm done with life, and it's all Jermaine's fault. It's always Jermaine's fault. I'm done.
All right, you Dusty Jermaines and you Ashy Jeffries back at the house for a Monday. Punching the clock. I think it's going to be a good one. A couple of people have sent me this and sent me clips of this, and so I just ran across the whole entire interview. So I decided, let me react to this thing because white girl, you know, sometimes white girls can spit. Yeah, every now and then they can spit. They don't spit the same way, say, sisters do, but sometimes they can spit. So we're gonna get into that. I said, Dusty Jones, waiting for 82 minutes. Okay, batting first. Oh, the big guy, Dr. Goodbar, batting second. Mr. Shook, to you, this is the video I tagged you. Yep. Roddy, what's going on? Batting cleanup. John Smith, what's going on? Free agent Triple OG. Snowman, he got into the lineup. Batting seventh as a designated hitter. Okay. Make sure you rub that pine tar into the bat real good, all right? Adric, what's happening? Brooklyn's Finest, what's going on? Prince, Black Mills, Quentin, what's going on? There's a Woo Man Charles, what's happening? Royal Priest, what's happening? Captain Obvious, what's up? Barry Little, what's happening? Matt Brennan, Afro Manosphere Society, what's going on? Lavaris, the Waffle House King, what's going on? James Wingate, what's up? What's up, Eddie? Eddie in the second gear doing donuts in the parking lot in the good weather. Dusty Jones, what's going on? Shannon Green, what's happening? Michael Seville, what's going on? Federal in the A-Town, Granocracy Central. Hurricane Greg, what's happening? Olotito, what's happening? LAXT, what's happening? Ray, what's up? Painless Risen, what's going on? Ignatz, what's happening? Micah L, what's going on? Saint Seer, what's happening? Free Thinking Mandalorian. I've been a Ninja Watch. You've been Ninja Watch for 3 years? Okay, cool. Independent POV, what's up? Pragmatic Prime, what's going on? Yeah, they never learned until the reality force. Well, I told you, the environment controls women, not us. I said, it's Indigo Flow says my Dusty theme music. Okay. Panda Man, what's going on? Joe's. Let's see. Oh, here comes me, the pinch hitter. Bottom of the ninth. B-roll, what's going on? Instant Media, what's happening? Applebite, what's up? J-Mar? Landon, what's going on? The Yo? That's the PhD. You ought to react. You ought to go to this chick's channel, man. There's a lot of good stuff on there. I think there's I think I might do a pre-recorded about this black PhD talking about porn. Dark Knight, what's happening? Hey, Louis, what's up? You at work, Louis? Ivan, what's happening? Oh, Dark Knight, he's moving to Japan. All right. You and Passport OG. I said, sure did take my motorcycle for a spin. Oh, this is good. Well, yeah, if you ride a motorcycle, it is good weather. Eric O, what's going on? DM? Biafra forever. Okay, cool. Call me Skrilla. Okay, you watched the whole video in the thumbnail right before your last stream. Friday, I'm looking forward to your insights on this. Okay. Black males, what's going on? Mr. J. Matt, St. Cyr, I start back to school this summer. I'm taking macroeconomics and principles of financial accounting. I already know my professor is going to have exam current events with the economy. Oh, yeah, definitely. PM, what's up? Yeah, with all the with the tariffs, man. Yeah, this is gonna be. Yeah, may you live in interesting times. This is an interesting time for an economist, man, because this stuff doesn't happen very often. Barry Hamilton, what's going on? Red Planet, Money Motion, from the Arizona desk. Okay. PM, what's up? Yeah, well, everybody, these people right now. One of the economists said the United States needs to immigrate 3 million people a year. Yo, Boogie, what's up? And I think that's it. That's everybody. All right. Let's go ahead and roll because this is a long one. I want to get as much of her in as I can. Fascinating stuff, though. Fascinating stuff. So we'll get with it. Let me show you who they are. Okay. Interesting channel because I checked out clips of a couple more of her videos and very, very fascinating stuff from a feminist perspective when they actually can talk real talk instead of that fem speak that they use. It's an ex-feminist perspective on relationships and childless women with Darlene Lev, okay? And the channel's called The Radical Center. I'll put the link in the chat so you guys can do with it what you will, because we're not going to be able to play all of it. And here we go. Let me speed it up just a tad, because, you know, white academics do talk slowly.
Writer who reached out to me recently after listening to a couple of conversations that we've had on this channel, I think for specifically some of the solid ground conversations. And if you don't mind, I'll just read real quickly the paragraph that you sent me, because I think it really sets up an interesting discussion. So you said, I was so taken by our childless women ruining the world that I plan to incorporate the dialogue into a chapter/essay for the book you're working on. I heard a lot of the cause of the problem put on men. I agree and have experienced this, but would like to explore how feminism destroyed the courtship that much more directly led to marriage and family formation. Born in
very, very seldom do you hear women put the blame on themselves. Okay, most times women put the blame on men because they can, and women don't like to be shamed. Okay, they don't. Shame is kryptonite for a woman. Accountability is probably second, but shame is probably first.
1961, I experienced firsthand the revolution from moms at home to moms at work, from courting commitment to courting instability. I've toyed with writing a memoir called My Dumb Feminist Life, which would examine the choices I made in fealty to feminist narratives and how self-sabotaging so much of it was. So I'm so interested to explore your perspectives on this, and I'll let you just open it up. What's kind of, do you want to say a little bit about yourself first and kind of lay out a sort of the arc of how you've evolved in your thinking?
Well, one of the things that struck me about that particular conversation was, I mean, it resonates because I wound up childless myself and it wasn't necessarily intentional, but I also noticed, and I'm thinking you're all a little younger than I am, right? When were you all born on the panel? About
I was
Gen
born
X?
in the mid 70s, and then another one of the girls is the same age as me, and two of them are a little bit older, but still probably Gen X.
Yeah. So I was struck by how the dialogue was. I couldn't find a good man. I couldn't find a man who would commit. And this is how I wound up like this. And then, I think one person, forgive me if I can't remember everyone's names right now, but I watch every episode, and the discussions are all so interesting. But I was thinking, I know what happened because I lived through that change. And it's sort of like, if you
You got to remember, the boomers lived through the change, okay? We didn't cause the change, but we lived through it.
look at the French Revolution, the people who were coming of age right as the Reign of Terror starts would know something more than the people who are living in the aftermath and grappling with that. So my trajectory, my coming of age completely coincides with the sexual revolution when things really changed. And I like to say, and I have said to my students, probably at my own risk, that TV in the 60s was very family oriented,
Yes.
very much about
Very much so. Very much so.
being a good civic citizen.
Yes.
The morals were all, I would say, fairly universal. How to be a
The Brady Bunch and Father Knows Best and My Three Sons and shit like that. Yeah, very much so.
good person. How to handle the town bully. Mayberry RFD. Family. And then we start getting into relaxing the codes, and now there's murder and single police women. Charlie's Angels, which was a huge influence.
Huge influence, right? And my believe it or not, my grandmother loved Charlie's Angels. Black women love Charlie's Angels and love Shira and strong women. Okay, black women love that shit. Okay, so don't get it twisted. It ain't just white women. Black women probably love it even more.
On me, and it just completely changed. And by the time I reached my adolescence, now there is abortion. And I even remember I was sitting on the toilet when I heard on a talk show in the next room that my mother was listening to that now, Roe v. Wade has been passed. And I remember thinking, oh, good, I can do whatever I want.
Wow. Yep.
And we also had the pill. And so, this just...
In other words, and this, I did a short written by Janet Yellen, as a matter of fact, okay? An essay called The End of the Shotgun Marriage, okay? End of the Shotgun Marriage. In other words, with the pill, the sexual revolution, it unburdened women from pregnancy, but also unburdened men for responsibility of children.
It's brand new. And when something is brand new, people tend to react to it, overreact to it. It really completely liberated me and my friends as teenagers into basically having a lot of casual sex.
In other words, sex like men, and I think she's going to say it later on.
And it even seemed that you were supposed to, like the arbiters of correct opinions were imposing this on us, because I remember asking myself, and I know other women have said the same thing, why am I doing this? I don't really like it. It makes me feel bad. I'm also, regardless, sort of garnering a kind of a dubious reputation. But then I'm wired like that, and I can't seem to extricate myself from this habit. And, all of the advertising, much of what I was reading in teen magazines was sort of promoting this, you don't have to live like your mother, and you can live like a man.
Yeah, you see that? You don't have to live like your mother, and you can live like a man, right? Which they deny, okay? Modern feminists deny that shit, right? That we're not trying to be like men. We're trying to be like blah, 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 blah. No, she's telling you straight up, okay, you can live like a man. So living like a man was the gold standard.
And another anecdotal evidence story with anecdotal stories. Anyway,
Terrence, that's not the day to day. I've already talked about that in other places. Okay, that's not the day to day. Stay on track.
Little lack of sleep last night. I had 5 friends that I hung out with in high school. We called ourselves the Coyotes. And our motto was, we can do what men do, and we can do it even better. And we would drive down the main street hooting and whistling at guys and, drinking a lot. And getting ourselves in all kinds of sexual trouble. And recently, we a few of us got together and we were reflecting on that, and we realized that this was a very short window of time, because AIDS comes along in 1983 and changes everything. So I would say that
it didn't change that much. It didn't change that much. It changed a little bit, but it didn't change that much.
people born between, say, 1958 and 1965 are the people whose life story sort of goes along with goes alongside this change. And in the essay, A Requiem for the Patriarchy, that I sent you, in the 60s, it really was like there was a dad in every house. There was only one household where there was no father. That mother was divorced.
Even in as much as they like to say that black men abandoned the family, okay, even in the black family, the vast majority of homes had a man in the house, okay, vast majority.
And had a daughter named Tammy, and they lived with her grandparents. I am not going to say that those marriages were all happy marriages. I mean, even in my own household, it wasn't a love match by any stretch of the imagination, but absolutely it was a home. And
hey, Doc, if you want to come up, just let me know.
I was a very observant kid, spent a lot of time alone watching everybody. And I would say that in most cases, that was the sense that every one of those houses was a home. And for the most part, the mothers were all in those homes. And then the no-fault divorce thing comes
and no-fault divorce thing came up, and guess what women did?
Along. And it's like everybody sort of jumps on that bandwagon. And by the time I get into high school, there were the kids whose parents were divorced, and those were the cool kids who could do whatever they wanted because nobody was around to watch them. We were going into those houses and smoking pot and drinking their drinking their mother's.
Oh, really? And these are the white people, the suburban white people, okay? So it didn't just affect us, right? They had the money to kind of cushion that shit, though. Black people didn't.
Alcohol and I would say that those are the kids, when I look back, who didn't really fare off very well. So, I'm grossly generalizing, but, on the other hand, I think I'm observing a trend. The breakdown of the family, the sort of permitting, getting out of commitments and not seeing things through. And I think where we are today is in a habit of not trusting that you can get through a bad period with a spouse or a partner.
Because they don't make you stay in. Because back before no-fault divorce, well, that's how come they had to have the alimony and child support, is because when them white chicks first jumped out there and divorced those men, okay, alimony couldn't catch up. Okay, them chicks went into poverty. That's how come they came back in and said, okay, we gotta have to bring back some of the patriarchy.
And see it through to the end. We are now wired to get out.
Yep.
And I've done that.
Yep. That's the beginning of the partnership.
Myself many times. And when I look back, I say, the one marriage that I got out of, I really think I shouldn't have done that. I never really did any better. And, and I made these choices by rote because I was listening to this other, these sort of voices up there who are telling you what you're supposed to feel, what you're supposed to want. And now we have social media doing that.
Ooh, see. Tell them women go by what they're supposed to think, what they're supposed to feel, right? From other women.
And, some of the things I did were really incredibly callous and very much anti-family formation, anti-life. And, that was the theme of the essay. It just seems that we are being guided in that direction to move away from all of the kind of social mores that encouraged us and facilitated family formations and producing life.
Well, it's quite a retrospective. And your perspective is really fascinating. And it kind of seems like everybody has to want to change that altogether in a way, because you do have these cases of men who have trouble finding a good partner but want that more traditional life, and women who want to find a good partner but have trouble finding someone, like the women on that.
Because they're not trained, okay? They want to, okay, but they're not trained. It's like I want to play NBA basketball, but things I'm not trained. Okay.
That panel discussion you were describing, a couple of them, their story was, yeah, I've been married, but my partner never wanted kids and wanted me to work, and it wasn't something I could just do, or I couldn't find a stable relationship where it felt like it would be safe to bring a kid into the world and not end up a single mom supporting my child. I didn't want that picture for myself, and so
yeah, but they jump all over men when men say the same thing. Okay, they say the same thing, but they blame men for it.
Where do we go from this point? Or maybe this is too soon in the conversation to ask the next question.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because that is how it was, though.
Okay.
If this is too fast, let me know, because they were a little slow, so I sped it up to 1.5. So if it's too fast, let me know.
People got married and had children. That is the world that I grew up in. And so how did we get to a world where, and those were the same questions I asked myself, I don't want to get stuck. I'm worried that he'll run off.
Which is what happened to me.
And I don't want to get stuck, because he might run off, right? And now, guess what? 30 years later, men are saying the same thing, but guess what they say? They call us cowards, right?
Of my marriages, that's exactly what happened to me. Is you do have children with someone, and then you're left alone to raise your kids by yourself. You have to figure that out because the other person did not maintain a commitment. I mean, in one case, it was drugs and alcohol, pornography and strippers. In another case, it was sex addiction.
So who left? Was it him or you?
And again, that same kind of spiral down and out of the relationship. And so when you
in other words, she left, they didn't.
See evidence all around you of that marriage is falling apart, despite one person can want to maintain, but if the other person doesn't, how do we come back to something more stable when both parties, both men and women, and it's so broadly general when you say that, because that's not, those trends are there, but you can't distill the trend down to the individual. The individual stories are going to be.
Now it's funny, okay? Even with white women, right? When it's men's fault, okay, it's man's fault, right? It's not men and women. When it's woman's fault, it's men and women, right?
Different, but how do you get back to something where people value that connection if so many people don't? So many people are disillusioned and demoralized.
I think that I'm going to suggest it was women who created this problem. I'm not going
to incorporate the dialogue into a chapter.
What you're supposed to want. Now we have social media doing that. In my own create.
See,
I was going to say it away
all around you of that marriage is falling apart, despite one person can want to maintain, but if the other person doesn't, how do we come back to something more stable when both parties, both men and women, and it's so broadly general when you say that, because that's not, those trends are there, but you can't distill the trend down to the individual. The individual stories are going to be different, but how do you get back to something where people value that connection if so many people don't? So many people are disillusioned and demoralized.
I think that I'm going to suggest it was women who created this problem. I'm not going to say that there haven't been ne'er-to-do men. In my own family, my grandfather's father ran off and created.
Say it again, white girl.
Another family in Seattle, and left his mother with 9 children. But most of the men in my ancestry were family, fathers, family stayed intact, not necessarily happy, but very much attached.
I said, I know both of them. They fought me tooth and nail from forming a Decatur chapter of the IBMOR Stepdaddy Union. Hey, with the fuck them kids T-shirt, right? and the White Sox hat
to their families. So how did this change? I would say it was feminism that gave men even more permission to take off. Yep. I would say it's up to women to bring it back. I think it was women, and this is the.
Well, you never hear white women saying that white men abandon the family, do you? Do you? So now that the money is gone, they want to talk. They want to walk it back. Of course they do. Writings on the wall. The shit don't work.
The issue that I take with this whole patriarchy assertion, I think that women really always have been the ones who controlled men. And all of the inventions and things that we have today where, some woman, I'm sick of going down to the river to wash my clothes, and then he invents a washing machine. I'm tired of getting pregnant every year. Now we have the birth control pill. And, all of these things actually serve to liberate women from the enormous amount of work that they used to have.
Oh, bullshit. They could have got out there and plowed the field.
That tethered them to the home and gave them, more freedom to go out and work. But I would say that by sort of moving away from religious communities, questioning that, and then questioning the whole marriage and having children project gave men more license to behave badly and put women in this much more precarious position. They used to control men by, you're living in a town where everybody knows if you're the male who's treating his wife poorly. You know, that's also part of it. We're more atomized, we're less community oriented, and you can get by with a lot more. I mean, even, you know, where I live in Brooklyn, I'm so convinced that I'm invisible that I'm not always aware of my behavior. I'm not always aware that actually people might know who I am. I really do feel like I'm walking around in a vacuum. And that might lend itself to behavior.
Like I said, women are wired for connection, right? That's what she's talking about. Both of them actually talk about the same thing. They're wired for connection.
In, you know, rude ways that I wouldn't normally if I were living in a community where I knew that everybody knew me. So, you know, we sort of broken apart these communities that women actually held together. So where I grew up, you know, my mother wasn't friends with everybody, but we knew everyone. I knew everyone in the subdivision, which family lived in what house, how many kids they had, and you know, some sense of what the parents were like. Where I live now, I don't know. I don't have a clue. And the only time I did in Brooklyn was when I was not working and I was home all day, and I wound up becoming friends with someone who had a kid. And then she and I were roaming around the neighborhood together, and I got to know everybody because she was more connected to the neighborhood because she had a child. And my association.
Yep. That is very true. The kids play with each other, and the adults get to know each other through the children. That's very true.
With her connected me more, and that we look back on and say that was one of the best periods of time in both our lives, when we got also after work, people were coming home from work and they would stop by our stoop to talk, and I knew the kids, you know, and then the building got sold and we were all dispersed, and that was the end of that community and that golden period of time. So, you know, in my neighborhood, my mother had a few friends, and they became lifelong friends, and they connected over needlework and watching each other's children. And they were also all around the same age, which is another issue we can talk about. If everybody is dating toward marriage, which in my experience, that was thrown away. Now you don't know what you're doing.
Remember I said that? Everybody had a role. Everybody was actually trained to follow a path and trained for a role that no longer exists. She's admitting it. That's thrown away. Okay? The feminists threw it away. It wasn't the boomer feminists. It was actually the silent generation. That she threw it away because they wanted to make sure they were the last group of women that should do it that way. They wanted their daughters to go live the life that they couldn't. In fact, she said that later on. I don't know if we'll actually get to it.
But he was dating toward marriage and family formation, and so everybody's around the same age when they're having their children, and this creates a sort of, you know, a community. If I could quote myself from one of my own comments. Nothing marginalizes a woman more than going childless. You want to avoid getting stuck holding the bag, but then again, you know, if you end up with nothing, you're even more endangered.
Yeah, there's so many things you just said that are interesting threads to pull on, like the sense of anonymity that you describe, being out of touch with a community, feeling like you're just one of a bunch of people, but not part of any kind of meaningful collective. That is just like the internet. And you see all this terrible, it's like a hate machine. The whole, you know, people are like this and this condescending.
Yeah, Hurricane Greg, these are the Gucci boot warriors trying to do a reset, hit the taco stands, like put it just like button. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the taco money. Appreciate you.
Self-righteous behavior that you see all over the place. Yeah, the anonymity. I think it's hard to even fathom how much that's changed us as people, the sense that we aren't responsible and accountable to the people around us because those relationships are so fleeting or unimportant or insignificant.
And it's replaced religion, right? I mean, that's inside of us. And so we throw away organized religion, which is where we used to meet our spouses, which was community. You know, my parents were a sort of a mixed marriage. My dad was Jewish and my mother not. And they sent us to Sunday school in the morning so they could have some time alone. But I still remember, you know, that was a community. I remember the characters at the church and, you know, the feeling that we all belong to this place. And then people, you know, then the wisdom is to get away from that because they're trying to control you and they're trying to curtail your freedom. But that is where you
trying to that what is it, that negative liberty that Mr. Z and Dr. G talks about all the time. Not always a good thing. It's all can go with your tacos. I heard that. I'm probably gonna need one after this. And plus it's tax time too. Oh yeah.
would have organically met someone to marry that you might have grown up alongside and formed some kind of, friendship that precedes marriage. Whereas, you throw that away. What were my options for meeting a man in 1978, 79, 80, which is, the time period when I would have been like 18 to 21, marriageable age back in the day. Bars. Bars and.
Appreciate that, Al. Getting back in the groove. Okay, let me know, man. Let me know what comes out of the lab.
Concerts, where I'm high and I'm drunk, and the wisdom is to try this person out right away on the first night and then try to cobble some kind of relationship out of it. I was never able to do that. And I was also never really able to advocate for myself and say, well, this is what I want. No matter what the arbiters, this is how I refer to them in my novel, the arbiters of correct opinions were telling me, I didn't agree with it, but I continued to act upon it. From, probably from the moment of I hit puberty, all I could think about was having babies.
Wow.
That was my instinct. That was what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Say it again, white girl. Say it again, white girl.
I had a mother who was telling me that I didn't want to do this. And that's also part of my story, but I'm sure, other mothers were not saying that. Mine just so happened to be that way. You are not going to grow up and have, you are not going to have children. You're going to do this and you're going to do this and you're going to do this. In other words, I'm going to fulfill what.
Exactly. That's what silent generation women told their daughters. I heard my mother tell my sisters the same thing. Okay. Silent generation. Okay. Don't follow down my path. Okay. I think there was Candy Staten had a song called Young Hearts Run Free back in the 70s, right? Like late 70s, right? Saying don't be a fool like my man and me. Don't get hung up. In other words, don't get married, don't have babies, don't get into this sad situation of being married and kids and bogged down. Okay. That was a real big thing back then. Women kill me with this happiness. You aren't supposed to be entirely happy for the length of the marriage, and marriage has its peaks and valleys. Most times, okay, marriage is supposed to be content. Okay, if you want to be happy, happy has peaks and has peaks and valleys. Okay, where you're gonna be really happy and you're gonna be really sad. Okay, contentment is that smooth line right down the middle. A smooth line right down the middle. Okay, if you focus on being content, okay, it's like an 80% chance that 80% of the time you're gonna be content. Okay, what happens if you want to be happy, you're gonna get bored because contentment is not enough.
She didn't get to do because she had children. But the message inside the house was the message that was outside the house too. And so here I am with a guy that I've slept with, but don't know, I don't know how to say, I really want a committed relationship. There was something shameful and humiliating about that. Then some years down the line, I have a friend saying, well, why can't you just tell him that you want to see him again? And I don't know how to do that. And then interestingly enough, whenever I did say that, they would say, well, that's not what I want.
And in other words, once you break the contract, they're not bound to it.
Whereas in my mother's day, that's just what people did. See, there was no shame in saying that's what you wanted. That's just what people did. And if it didn't look like the relationship was going to be compatible for marriage, they would get out and go to the next one. But in my experience, it was, well, I want this deep down inside. I'm afraid to say so. Which guy is going to be the one that I can do this with? How do I even have that conversation? It was incredibly confusing. And whenever I have brought up feminism as sort of confusing things and creating chaos, people will inevitably say, but you have choices now. Well, I don't agree. I think women always had choices. And there were plenty of people in my, universe.
Yep. Women always had choices. The thing is, some of the choices, if they want to make that choice, they could live alone by themselves. And, the world was not the way it is now. Let's put it this way. They've made it nice and comfy for women being alone. It didn't used to be that way.
Older generations, there was actually my grandmother's cousin was a lesbian, lived with her partner, never, bought a house with her and lived like they were married. And my grandmother would never admit that they were gay, but they were. Another friend of my mother's was a career woman who never worked and traveled the world. He never married and traveled the world.
Mhm.
So, you know, and if you look honestly at history, you could see women doing all kinds of interesting things. But what everyone was doing was getting married and having a family. And then, you know, and then she would do something else when the kids were in school.
Mhm.
But, you know, in my generation, we were fumbling around, not knowing how to get what we deep inside really wanted. And the men were
Ooh.
like, well, you know, now that I don't have to do this anymore, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Exactly. That's Janet Yellen said exactly the same thing. Okay. Well, once they said, okay, we're not bound. You don't want the contract, so we're not bound to it either. We just don't forget your man. Oh, okay. Els is here too. Okay. My pops taught me happiness is dangerous because happiness is based on what's happening. You'll be chasing a high from one relationship to another. Yep, you will. But just women couldn't get credit cards or bank account, whatever excuse they say. Yeah, well, they could have started their own banks. I've been covering a lot of this surreptitiously in my sociology class. Thank you for posting this dialogue. It helps me in seeing where these kids are going. Yes. They sent these chicks in a send off. Yes, they did. They didn't send them. They jumped to it.
So I'm going to go back to suggesting that it was women who gave men permission.
Yes.
To be irresponsible.
So you can be irresponsible, throw your coochie around, go from man to man to man, and they're irresponsible, but you're not. Interesting.
And the lack of community oversight also lends itself to that. You are alone in the middle of nowhere and no one's really watching you. And I'm not going to say that that's great either, but if we have to decide what really is better for everyone, perhaps it would be more connection around community and not politics. That we are all families that live in this place, and we collectively want to create a really nice place.
Yeah, that's what happens when you get in your 60s. All of a sudden, you see life for what it really is.
For us to thrive in, and in essence, that is the kind of place that I grew up in.
Well, I'm certainly no feminist scholar, and I don't know I don't know that much about feminist history, honestly. When I was younger, it was more in vogue to be a feminist, and now it's not. And when it was I was kind of turned off by the harshness of what I perceived in it. This is coming. One of the things I think, like when we're talking about the post-industrial revolution timeline, we're talking about these radical social changes that are happening along sort of a moving river, lots of currents moving in and out. And so I try to resist the thought that it used to be like this, instead of just thinking like at this time it was like this, and then at this time it was like this. And so there's all these emergent qualities that are shaping the way people experience their societies, their families, themselves, their identity throughout this sort of modern era. And I have a sense that at some point there were good things that were done in the name of feminism in order to give women certain legal statuses and rights as people. And that I'm not really sure of a solid opinion on something like no-fault divorce. To some extent, I think that it's a useful thing because I've been in a relationship where I was being physically abused as well as being cheated on. And in this case,
So you left. So they didn't leave you. You left. See, that's the part she left out because according to her partners left her. Okay, they abandoned the relationship. Right? I knew that was bullshit. Not two of them.
A lot of the things that happen in a relationship where there's domestic abuse are sort of subtle. It's kind of hard to build a case, and nobody's witnessing these things. It's he said, she said. And by the time you're in a relationship that's really contentious, both people are not being their best self. Both people are at times saying and doing things that somebody outside of the relationship would go, you guys are a mess. So there can be a lot of difficulty in, even if you were to bring all of this before, say, a impartial third party, getting them to say, okay, this is clearly out of line. You've got denial of charges. You've got whatever. So it becomes very messy if you were to have to prove that. And people in really bad relationships having the opportunity to say, I don't have to justify my reasons for leaving this. I want a chance at something better, where maybe even being alone is better than what I'm experiencing here. So I'm going to just take.
Like Thomas Sowell says, there are no solutions, only with trade-offs, right? Okay, yeah. You got what you wanted, but guess what the trade-off is?
That chance. I'm not ready to throw that ideal away. But what's interesting to me, sort of this thread that's running through my thoughts as I'm reflecting on the things.
Sounds like she sees all the wolves outside and has appreciation for someone prepared to fight them if necessary. Yeah.
that you're saying is this kind of the freedom that people have gained throughout this modern era has left us sort of seeking and expecting that we can perfect things, that we can reach something better. So like thinking about your mother and her saying to you, don't have kids, don't do what I did. She's wanting something for you that's better than her perception of what her life was like.
Yeah, exactly. Say it again, white girl. And that's how you get your education, and you don't need no man. Don't worry about men. Get your career together. Men will always be there. Blah 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 blah. White women didn't say it as vociferously as black women did, but saying it's the same shit, right? You can hear it. This is that feminist shit. So when black women say that, that's feminist stuff, okay?
And then she did tell me. So she did tell me that she realized that my life was actually much harder than hers.
Oh wow, that's interesting. So
yeah, she got old. Yeah,
she did have it better.
I want to hear about that. But I also want to reflect, like, these men who aren't interested in seeing a young woman again after one physical encounter. They're thinking, what are they thinking? Is it quantity? Is it quality?
Why don't you ask a man? Okay, why are you asking a woman? Why don't you ask a man? Okay, why are you asking a woman what a man thinks? I don't get that.
Is it like, maybe I would find someone who's a better mate for me? I met this woman. No, she's not.
Nah, you're available. Okay, you're available, and if he can sleep with you after one time, he doesn't know you. Okay, you think just because you open your legs for him, he's supposed to stay with you? Well, that's female think. Okay.
Quite what I'm looking for, so I'm not interested in more. But if I meet somebody who really knocks my socks off, then I might. But as long as you have the sense that there's something better out there, and then you keep striving for it, it's like. And then a lot of the, I guess I shouldn't say a lot, but several of the women that I've spoken with in the course of these dialogues over the past, I guess, year or so, who've talked about their experience of not ever becoming mothers, have said, I didn't want to do to someone what I felt was done to me. I felt like I was going to perpetuate something that I think was undesirable in my own family.
Oh, in other words, you didn't like being a kid. Okay. And see, ProAction says, hello, Mr. BGS. There is a 55-minute interview of a former family court judge on YouTube about the decline of family because of feminism. Okay. I'll look for it.
Or my own behavioral patterns, or I didn't think that I was good enough to be somebody's mother. And so I thought that I should just stop this process with myself. Like, I will just not go on to do this to another generation. And so there's always that thought that there's some perfect way to be a person, a family, a parent, a partner, and that we shouldn't try if we can't be perfect. So I don't know. I'll let you pick up from there. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's also like the I wasn't ready, or I wouldn't have been ready to have children. And you have to ask yourself, what does that even mean?
When would you ever be? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that the hyper hormonal craziness of adolescence is designed exactly to get us into that situation and launch us into adulthood. It's jumping into having children, and it makes you ready. And I think we have certainly, and we can look to the pill for that, left the idea that life is actually something that happens to you. You don't really have complete control over it, but we have been given that illusion. And then also we have been given, or been sort of convinced into thinking that the domestic abuser, or the marriage that isn't working. And how do we even define that?
Once the lies are exposed, it's no longer popular or in to be a feminist, because it doesn't work. It's not just lies. Women don't want what they asked for 60 years ago. They don't want to be men. They don't want the responsibilities of men. That's the problem. That's why it doesn't work.
That's the other thing. I think that the definition has just gotten too close to cutting and running, and not even trying anymore to make it work or see your way through.
Well, how come 80% of the divorces actually promoted by women? It's not the men that are cutting and running out of marriages.
Something. And even just recently in my own life, going through a really, really hard time, and I'm trying to figure out how I can get out of this. And and then we somehow made our way through it. And everyone around me is saying, oh yeah, he's like this, you need to get out of there. So that's the other thing. More encouragement on behalf of friends.
Yes.
To get out. Another anecdote I can provide, just this idea.
Very common, right? We think it's only black women to say this, but it's white women too. They just don't say it as loudly.
What things are supposed to be like versus the way they really truly are. Years and years ago, a friend, coworker, had a baby. Husband is launching a restaurant. He's working day and night. And she says to me, I'm like a single mother. He's never here. But he was.
Oh, it sounded like a lot like Michelle Obama, didn't it? Michelle Obama said the exact same thing, right? I'm a single mother. When you're actually married to the doggone president of the United States. But I'm a single mother.
He was working so that she could stay home with the kid. And he was working very hard. And he was faithful to her. And I said, you know, he's a man. He doesn't feel exactly the same way you do about baby. Mm-hmm. He's actually doing a lot to give you the time with the baby. And, you know, and to me, this is also kind of like a fantasy. She's going to the park, pushing the stroller up and down. You know, she knows everybody in the neighborhood, and I'm trailing along, and nobody's paying any attention to me.
Well, he's banging 15 hours at the restaurant, okay, trying to make a life for him, okay, and she's pushing a stroller, complaining.
I don't matter to these women because I don't have a baby. Mm-hmm. And she told me later that I, for all intents and purposes, saved her marriage, that every one of her friends was telling her to get out of this situation. If you think about it, here's a man working very hard to pay for everything so that she has the time with their child, and she's got it into her head that he's not doing enough because he's not doing what she can see in her own domestic sphere, but he's out.
Exactly. He's not being a woman.
Out there doing a lot. You know, so I think that we have also been sort of, and I don't know, it's indoctrinated into thinking or expecting things that are just totally unrealistic. And, you know, I think we also use the, you know, the domestic abuse thing. You know, yes, some relationships you absolutely have to get out of them. That's true. But I think we're using that as a basis for why, at the slightest provocation, you get out of there. And, you know, my own household was by no means perfect. Some not so good things went on there. And even with those things, if I think about growing up with just my mother, I can't even begin to imagine it. My father died when I was 20. He was sick with cancer throughout my late teens. And after he was gone, I saw just how weak and vulnerable my mother really was without him. I saw just how
what it was like without the father, because you thought it was your mother doing all the work.
How much my father really did contribute to
yes after you're gone, okay, like I always said, and me and KMS were laughing about that, right? Okay, a black woman won't act right unless you leave her once. It's probably the same true for a white woman too.
Balanced household, again, absolutely not perfect. She probably even had reasons to leave him, but if he had lived, you know, I wonder, you know, whether they would have stayed married. They probably would have, and hopefully we would have seen our family through, you know, this some of these things that went on. So, you know, and I was the person who experienced the brunt of it, but I still wouldn't have wanted my parents to get divorced, and I wouldn't have wanted to break up my family.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
And actually, since he died, we weren't a family anymore.
Oh, it really dissolved.
It really, you know, it really dissolved the family, and all like strangers to one another.
What was your mother's statement to you about your life being harder than hers? When was that revelation? Or that?
Got 600 people watching, only 222 likes. If you can't give me $1, give me a like, okay? I don't ask for dollars, but I do ask for likes, okay? This is stuff that you guys are interested in, right? Because some of this stuff is like watching paint dry, okay? I could be watching stripper videos and tech, because I love tech videos. And my absolute favorite guilty pleasure is cheating videos. I love cheating videos, man. I do. I got to listen to at least one cheating video a day. I do. But the thing is, if you can't give me $1, give me a like.
That thought.
Yeah, I mean, why would women give this up? So you know what my mother did most of the day? She was not a stellar housekeeper, and actually my interest in interior design and my obsession with cleanliness is because I couldn't stand how unkempt our house was. And I was always...
But she hated her life, though.
You know, cleaning and moving things around to try to, you know, create a sense of order there. But she was very creative. She was always making things. She sewed my clothes, all of our clothes, made quilts for us. And in most of the households on our block, the women did needlework, did wonderfully creative things. And, you know, if I think about the atmosphere on the block during the day, you know, they were making things, socializing, creating a sense of community.
Yeah. But they had a hard life, okay? So BGS, how chaotic would it be if the government said we were quadrupling your imports of women and changing the environment to be fair tomorrow? Like, what exactly would women, maggles, and the male feminists do? Probably commit suicide. suicide by drinks and Valium, putting $5 into the Quesadilla Fund. Appreciate you. I said, let your fingers agitate the like button. Please do. Give me a like.
And then you drive down that street, 40 years later, and all the windows are closed and the doors are locked, and it's a ghost town. And maybe you have a few random children coming home and unlocking the door alone. I mean, just think about the identity crisis with kids today. I would say it also can be traced back to this. Who am I? I'm living marooned in this place. Who are my neighbors? Maybe I don't know. I have friends who everybody has a different last name in the family. That's the other thing, right? Like the girls have the mother's last name and the boys have the father's last name. Like,
yeah. That's, why? That's because, they don't want you out socializing with half siblings. That's why. So they're copying after black people without understanding why black people actually did that shit.
Just not even the whole family having the same last name, right? So yeah, it's like just
you don't like being black, huh? Interesting.
The expectations are way too high. The idea of being ready is, and also we have been told or made to believe that we have to get out if he's bad. Never mind how bad she is.
Yeah.
Say it again. Some of the
say it again, white girl. Say it again. How bad he is. Never mind how bad she is. And these are white women, okay? These ain't Klingons. So the Klingons are on quadruple that time. Okay. Never. It's never about her. It's about him. So even white boys are germane now.
Mothers on the block were absolute terrors, and you could hear them shrieking at the house. Back then there was air conditioning, right? You could hear, which house had a shrew in it and a henpecked husband. We don't really also talk about that. So you end up alone with the kids to get away from the bad man. But what about the mom who's overwhelmed, overworked? And this, I think, is where, if we're telling this story and it has an arc, where we might get people a few generations removed from mine who say, I don't want to do that to someone else, because I grew up with a single mother who was completely overworked and miserable.
Yeah.
And my dad was absent, or I saw him only. So why would I do that to someone?
Yeah.
And yet this freedom to get out of something that is bad is supposed to be a solution, but it actually created a much bigger problem.
It created a much bigger problem. I have to import people. Okay. Now I don't have enough kids. Now there's a whole bunch of other crap that has been wrought upon you. Now you're trying to convince boys, young boys and men to do what you said they shouldn't do way back then. Probably not going to happen. Appreciate you, Arbeen. Appreciate you, Shabazz. And the sad part is you expect white women to be more honest about the problems of their females, of their group, than black women. I guess so. What's up, Art?
Yeah, I really admire that you're discussing these things the way, with this openness. I think that I hope that people who listen to this conversation will be kind in their responses, because these things are so touchy to talk about. These things are so hard for people to discuss. You can't start discussing women and men without tripping over lots of people's feelings and legitimate caveats and their own life experiences. So I find it to be such a sensitive area to wade into on any level of public discussion. And so what you usually end up seeing are these really big sweeping stereotypes.
No, they're not that sweeping. Okay, they're pretty common.
And inflammatory statements. But what you're describing, I mean, these are trends that you've noticed over the course of your life and how they've shaped your perception of.
And it's reflected in the numbers too. It's not just that she's noticed over the course of her life. It's reflected in the numbers. The numbers tell it.
Your world, the world that we live in and what's been going on. And I think that there's so many, I don't know. I hesitate to lay any blame on women or on men for some of these things. I think that it's emergent between us. I think we're so interconnected that, like, take one area that.
No shit, men and women interconnected. Huh? What a concept.
A lot of people would agree is dysfunctional, and that's prostitution. That, sex work in general, pornography, prostitution. There's a lot of dysfunction around this, a lot of disagreement, a lot of controversy, but at heart, it's an exploitation of men's sexuality.
What? What? Prostitution and pornography is an exploitation of what? Men's sexuality. Huh. Interesting. Say it again, white girl. They must have had some drinks before they got on here because they're telling the truth.
Women's sexuality. And it's also an exploitation of women's sexuality using men's sexuality. There's sort of a complementary loop that's happening where people are exploiting one another.
And women get paid. No, that's bullshit. Exploiting one another. And all of a sudden now we're going back in, it's both people's fault. No, bullshit.
And I think that a lot of these interactions that you're describing, being able to leave more easily, what that does to him, what that does to her, and how it impacts him and how it impacts her. There's kind of a balancing of the impact and the fault ultimately, because one couldn't fall apart if they weren't vulnerable to falling apart, but they also couldn't fall apart if the other hadn't fallen apart. So it's such a precarious and delicate thing, this relationship between the sexes.
I think in one of the essays in the book, I just recently watched Love Story. You know that movie?
I don't know it.
With Ali McGraw and Ryan O'Neal. It was one of the most famous movies of 1960s.
Okay.
It's really interesting.
Okay.
If you watch movies from the 70s, just when this whole way of thinking is starting to turn, he is so madly in love with her. And frankly, her dialogue is a little abusive. And he finds it very,
oh yeah, she wasn't that kind of nasty to him.
very charming. And I noticed in a lot of movies from around this period of time, there is so much love still shown between the men and the women as they're grappling with this new society. But as we have evolved, it really is like there's just more separation. So, some years ago in a literature course that I taught, I did it on the theme of love. And I thought that they would be really interested in this. I certainly would have been myself, but they were incredibly cynical. And I gave them free license to, I gave them the feminist lens, even though I really don't want to deal with that. But I made very clear that they didn't have to agree with it. And I paired some Baudelaire poems with Black Venus by Angela Carter. And this is considered a very feminist story. And Black Venus, Jean Duval was Baudelaire's mistress, and she was from the West Indies. And so there's all of this critical lens applied to his exotification of her and blah, blah, blah. But if you do a little
okay. A little race mixing. Okay.
research, you actually find out that he had a trust fund, and she introduced him to laudanum and basically became an addict. And she had been a prostitute, and somebody gave somebody syphilis, and they both died of it. So yes, there's certainly some reciprocal exploitation going on. But I said, who would you rather have a beer with? In Black Venus, he's not doing enough for her. He's this, he's that. It's just bitching about him, and he's writing.
Was that a black woman in Black Venus? Interesting.
About how beautiful she is, and if she would only take him seriously, and if she would only love him as much as he loves her. And in my sort of world, many of the men in my community love their wives, couldn't live without them. And so when we talk about the leaving, I think actually the men really are wounded by this. And I fell into the manosphere for a while, and just like what Benjamin with all the detransitioners and the men whose wives just turned on a dime on them.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the manosphere started. Men whose women had basically turned on them. Yeah, that's how it started. It wasn't the single young men that never had any experience. No, that's not the way it starts. It was actually older men in their 30s and 40s who had gotten basically ran through by women, and then they came here for solace.
And then they end up having to pay child support. And that's another reason why, men are hesitant to have children now.
Yes, white girl. Yes. Yes, white girl.
And get married. This also happened to a relative of mine. He got married, and after she had a baby, she said she came from a wealthy family. She said, now that I have my baby, I don't need you anymore.
Welcome to Jermaine. Welcome to Jesse Jermaine's playpen. Wow.
He was absolutely devastated by this. So, that's the other thing I would like to. A narrative got us here, let's say, and a narrative will get us out. I think men do love women. We have forgotten that. If I could quote one of my comments from my essay, one of the greatest tragedies of the feminist project is denying how much men have loved and cherished women and their work.
Well, because the story couldn't spread unless they could say that men hated women.
It's women who decided that our work was not valuable
Oh,
anymore.
ooh,
It's women who actually decided that being a mother was a form of drudgery.
ooh.
But any kind of hard work is a form of drudgery. I've been a professor for years, and nothing is more drudgery than grading essays. I mean, I would much rather be washing dishes and, frankly, changing diapers.
Whoa, whoa, what?
That's interesting. Yeah, I can't help but think that there's truth in all of those perspectives. Both, I mean, I've been a young mother, stay-at-home mom, and I can remember the absolute anguish, the loneliness of that, just the complete loneliness. I can remember.
Oh, you want it out. You want it out. So all that abuse shit goes out the window. You want it out.
Having 2 little kids, putting them in the stroller, and walking around the neighborhood, just aching for someone to see, and just going to the store just so that I could talk for a moment at the cashier stand to someone who would be another face and voice in my life, show me that I was worth a smile. When you work long hours, day in, day out, 24 hours a day with little kids as your only companions, and they're difficult and needy.
Why don't you trade places with your husband? Okay, how come you just didn't trade places? Have him stay home.
And lovely, and they bring a lot of joy, but they also bring a lot of work, and there's little human connection outside of that service that you're doing for your
But you
kids.
didn't have that where you were living, like where there were other mothers.
No. I struggled to find that. It took me a long time to find that. And even then, when I found, this is my own story, so I know other people will have a different story, but I became a mom really young. I was 19 when I had my first and 21 when I had my second. And I tried to join a play group, and it was really, I was just treated like I was kind of a teen mom by all these women who were in their 30s having children, and not, I wasn't an equal really in that group.
That's true. You weren't.
People's lives are just so individual, so these things are true. I can see that there's something that you lose in not getting to experience that, but there's something also that I understand the desire.
Oh, 20, yeah, I know. 24 hours with your children at home. All I gotta do is push a stroller and take care of the kids. Oh my goodness. But she never volunteered to have him stay home, did she? Did she? She could have, when the kids got older, she could have gathered the kids together and gone out to work. Because back then, Gen X, she could have done that. They had daycare. She could have done it. How come she didn't? She wants to stay home with the kids.
That women and mothers would have to have something more outside of the motherhood experience in the home. So
but it's interesting because everybody's doing that at a different time in their lives, and that's what put you in, as that made you an outlier,
right? Which kind of brings me back to my beef about education. I went when I was in college. So this would have been in like maybe 2005 or 6.
Oh shit!
I went to a lecture by a guy. I can't remember the guy's name. He was an author. He wrote a book called The World Without Us. And this was, are you familiar with this?
James Kunstler. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Kunstler, yes. My mother played Candy Staten's Young Hearts, Run Free and Victim over and over again on a new stereo. I had to listen to that as a teenager. According to Wikipedia, Candy had 6 husbands to date. Yes, she did. She was fine abroad, though, so I can see why. Male exploitation, PlayStation, frustration, or the Temptations. Lakers in 5. Okay.
Okay. And I went to this lecture, and I was really steeped in the idea that we've overpopulated, humans are destroying the planet. And one of the things that he put forth in that lecture, one of his big pieces of hope, was that we can turn overpopulation around, and we know how to do it. We just have to focus on educating women. Because if you educate women, they will put off childbearing. And so,
see, speak, white girl, speak.
So there was this big push that this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to engineer a better world by making sure that women are attaining postgraduate degrees in greater numbers, that they're going
and she's probably pretty close to the truth, right? It was engineered on purpose,
at least through university, so that we can get them to stop having children so young. By the time they start having children, some of them won't be able to anymore by the time they want to, and others won't be able to have as many, so we'll really curtail the birth rate. And if you are dealing with overpopulation, maybe that's a better way to do it than the one-child policy or some other ways that people have socially engineered. But the thing is, with social engineering, there are always going to be unintended effects. Whenever you're trying to decide for someone else that I'm going to look into your life, which is very intricate and complex, and I'm just going to nudge one variable because I see that as the variable that I should be manipulating. You don't know how many other systems are connected to that one variable. And when you do that across a population, you create all kinds of interesting and
you cause depopulation, right? So the white race has peaked already. Okay, The white race is peaked already. The white race is starting to die out because of this. I said, some women take more pride in fostering and rescue animals than raising their own blood. Make it make sense. It doesn't. Well, pets are easier to deal with. That's why. And the system was working exactly as it was designed. Exactly. Yep. She's that chick the older chick is talking about. Yep.
Unforeseen downstream effects of your one manipulation.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the one-child policy, but also, and I had another thought. God, I lost it. The one-child policy. I mainly was teaching Chinese nationals, and it came up in class. You know, this student was saying something about the one-child policy. I said, well, what's interesting is that it was forced on you, but propaganda convinced us to do the same thing.
Bars, white girl. Bars.
Yeah.
Bars, white girl.
And also just, you know, this whole idea that your life isn't very fulfilled, you know, unless you're doing more than creating a family. And what you were saying about being alone and isolated, I have to say, in my experience, and if I do write my dumb post-feminist life, I started writing a section of it. So we can take me to the age of 23. That period was so lonely and so upsetting, actually, when I look back on it and I see myself walking around, you know, working in restaurants and meeting people in bars when they're not at their best. So my main socializing is with drunk, high, mean people, you know, and sleeping off a night of, you know, sleeping the day after a graveyard shift, waiting on drunk people, you know, walking to and from work. Not really connected to a community apart from the friends that I left back home in the suburbs who I was still seeing and who were getting married and doing all those things while I'm living in this apartment, going to a restaurant job. And really, honestly, the only socializing I'm doing is in the restaurant or in a bar, you know. So if I have to choose between, say, the loneliness of raising kids, but then again, if we were all doing it at the same time, there would be more cohesion there. But we're alone now. You know, you were doing something that other people weren't doing.
Yeah. And we kind of have to live from where we actually are, not from this ideal. So I can see the need. I can see one is too much, one is too little. There's an imbalance in both of those scenarios that you paint, but there's, you know, maybe it's that ever striving for something better, which is what we do when we have these conversations too. I mean,
there's no solutions, only trade-offs.
We're talking about people striving for something better and then tipping that too far and falling into a new kind of chaos. And so then we strive for something better and we talk about how could we fix that and move it back towards something that's more of a balance point. But, you know, in my life, I've been that stay-home mom that was achingly lonely. And I've been the single mom who worked and went to school full-time and took her kids to all the sports.
No, actually, it was Mao that convinced China to have a one-child policy. It wasn't the World Economic Forum. Do you think that J.D. Vance is going to open the floodgates with importing women? If so, do you think he will be able to convince these young white boys to open up and their options and give up on Project White? He's not open. I mean, you imported in 3 years like 6 or 7 million Latina women, okay? And when they start deporting people, it usually will be the men. You got plenty of women here. There's plenty of women.
And the choir and the this and the that and felt completely frazzled and exhausted at the end of the day. And I've also had the opportunity to be the mom of young babies who had a part-time job. And so, you know, that was for me, that's just my own anecdote, but that was a really nice balance. Getting out, being able to have intellectual discussions or talking about things that are beyond the little, when you have a brain that wants discovery, but it has very little new input and new stimulation, that can be torturous for some people. So getting out and being able to have discussions that go beyond just the diapers and the what's for dinner and the house decorating and the plants and the husband and, you know, having these bigger, more worldly discussions, being in school, I see why people want that, men and women, why we want that kind
That chick didn't want to be married. You can hear it. She didn't want to be married.
of connection. And I don't think it's impossible to have both. I really don't think it's impossible to have both. It's impossible.
It's still that feminist dream. It's not impossible to have both. Okay. It's possible to have both if that man allows you to have both. That's what they're saying. I want it. I want both. I want the man to bring up the main support in the family and me work part-time while he kills himself with, you know, in 10, 12-hour a day jobs.
Well, to have one if you fully go into the other and abandon the path of the other.
I'm actually wondering whether the best way to get both is to go back to forming families earlier, and everybody's doing it around the same age.
Yeah,
So
I think that there's something to that. And in order to do that, we really need educational standards that allow people to have meaningful work young. So we need high school to really mean something. We need people to be able to get good work and do good work at age 20.
Yes.
Not wait till they're 25 or 30 before they're considered.
You're learning. We've been saying that for the last 20 years. Okay. White women weren't listening, were they?
An adult who can take responsibility. We need to actually have people assuming places of responsibility younger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we also need to go back to treating teenagers like they are emerging adults.
Dun, dun, dun. Say no. No, they're still babies. No.
Not children.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that I've noticed. And I'm working in a very female-dominated area, and the infantilization is just off the charts.
Yeah.
And I have even been mocked for treating our students like adults.
Wow.
Yeah, and they are all.
Yeah, we need houses and proper houses. You got money, you got a Congress, you got representatives, and you guys sit there and do nothing. Okay, but you come up on my platform and yell. Don't yell at me. Go yell at your congressman.
Childless. So you were touching on Jordan Peterson's
the childless women thing.
Concerns about childless women. Well, I'm seeing that in action, so I actually wanted to say, I absolutely see that. And
then you yourself are a counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
To be able to get good work and do good work at age 20.
Yes.
Not wait till they're 25 or 30 before they're considered an adult who can take responsibility. We need to actually have people assuming places of responsibility younger.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we also need to go back to treating teenagers like they are emerging adults and not children.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that I've noticed. And I'm working in a very female-dominated area, and the infantilization is just off the charts.
Yes, it is.
I have even been mocked for treating our students like adults.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're all childless. So you were touching on Jordan Peterson's
the childless women thing.
Concerns about childless women. Well, I'm seeing that in action, so I actually wanted to say, I absolutely see that. And
then you yourself are a counterpoint to that.
Yeah. Well, and they peck at me, like us, and so you're the black. I'm the black sheep of the department, because I'm like, Jessica, why are you buying their books for them? Just tell them where the bookstore is and what the title of the book is.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of push to send them to health services and to mother them. And there was this great. I think this anecdote is really telling. I don't do journals. I teach writing, and I will not do journals. I don't want to know what their personal lives are. It's none of my business. So I'm very old school in that regard. And when at the end of the semester, I had this Turkish student. She was all decked out in furs and jewelry, and she failed. And she came to me and listened. And she said, "I just want you to know, I learned a lot in this class, but I failed on purpose because I need to keep my visa. And I'm a high-priced call girl, and this is how I'm making money. And my parents won't. My parents have disowned me, and this is how I'm saving up to go to Parsons." And I said, "Okay." And then the next semester, I'm at the copy machine, and the coordinator comes up to me all in a panic, and she says, now the student's in the other teachers section, and she said, I don't remember the student's name, but did you know that she's a prostitute and or an escort? And I said, yeah. And then she said, and you didn't tell us? I said, no. Why should I tell you? It's she's an adult. She's 22 years old. It's her business. It's none of my business. But there really was this campaign to rescue this student from this. And while, maybe it wasn't such a great choice on her part, I don't really think my job as a professor is to get involved in a student's personal business. And I'm seeing this time and time again, and also just, celebrating weakness. Also, there was a suicide at the school where I was teaching before, and one of my students had seen this person jump out the window.
Oh my gosh.
And this APB goes out all across the school that this happened, and anybody who has been touched by it, you should give them more time to do their work. And I'm sorry, I don't agree with this.
It's so interesting because the outside in view of somebody else's life and trends and habits is both kind of the standpoint that there's a bit of a paradox here, because on the individual level, I think that we tend to respect choices, let people do, and we're not going to look too hard at what they're doing. Go ahead. And then on the zoom out social level, it's the aggregate of these kinds of choices that
macro, this screwing everything up. Yeah. At some point, you're going to have to come down on the individual, okay? Because you're not really an individual. You're a collective, but you don't act like it.
End up creating exactly the trends that we're sitting here describing today. So like this prostitute, she's both the epitome of this feminism gone wrong sort of thing that you're talking about, because she exemplifies this woman who's prioritizing sexual freedom and actually benefiting off of it, profiting off of it financially. She's also a lure to men who might want to do better, but because there's the supply and demand question, right? Like which is creating which. But she's definitely a part of that paradigm that's undermining both men and women. And yet, when you stand really
how's undermining men?
Close to it, how do you tell another person? How do you butt into another person's life? And we end up actually, if we advocate for individualism,
it's called shame. Yeah.
We would advocate against the very people who want to intervene and change that trend, both for her and for the ripple out effect that it will have on other people. So there seems like there's a little bit of a social paradox there.
Well, also, I'm sort of going back on what I was saying about community and how community watches over you.
Right. Oh gosh.
I think
isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Oh,
but
so
I find, but that's the thing.
Yeah.
In this sort of matriarchal university system we're in now.
Matriarchal universal system that we live now. Say it again, white girl. Matriarchal universal system that we're in right now.
The women want to do for the students what they would have done in their own
in a community. So they are a bit of that.
Yeah, and I'm saying that in these institutions, I'm not necessarily convinced that this is the right application for it. This is what Jordan Peterson is calling out.
Yeah,
that women are taking their unmet maternal instincts and applying them in places where applying that in places where it doesn't
belong. Yep, they're unmet maternal instincts. In other words, it's got to have an outlet. I see it all the time.
And I also have seen on social media, it's the unmarried, childless woman who's the loudest, posting the most, and
yes, white girl,
insisting that people think a certain way, is deciding what's offensive and what isn't.
Yes, Kim Foster. Yes,
it's not necessarily the guys, although I have seen guys go along with it. And it was say about 10 years ago, we were also told that we were not to cause harm in any way to the students, and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, how would I even know what that means? And I tried even asking, like, how do you even define that? And that's the other thing, that these words that used to actually mean something,
they become so watered down.
Goalposts have been moved to create like these so-called safe spaces.
Yeah.
So in other words, the women, I'm going to say, if I define patriarchy and matriarchy, what we used to live in, and what I would like to see us sort of navigate our way back to, is we actually weren't in a patriarchy.
What? An ex-feminist, okay? What? We're never in a patriarchy. Okay. Keep going.
Was a patriarchy and there was a matriarchy, and the women were matriarchally running this.
It's called an egalitarian society, right? Which is basically how Africans define a matriarchy.
Domain, and the men were patriarchally running this other domain, and the men returned home to the matriarchal domain, and they might have had some say, and some say they might.
Sounds a lot like Africa. Interesting.
Have made final decisions about some things, although I'm not sure, because when I look back anecdotally on what was going on in the houses in my neighborhood, though the women were running the show, and the men were doggedly going out to work.
Oh, you weren't oppressed. Interesting. Wait a minute, white girl. I thought your mama was oppressed.
Bringing home the paycheck. I actually think in the so-called patriarchy, the men got the probably the raw end of the stick in a lot of ways. When my father was dying of cancer, he still had to go to work and support our family. And my mother was doing some work at home, but my father was the primary breadwinner all along, even when he was sick. And to see him, after going through chemo, get up on a 20-degree below zero day and hack the car out of the snow and go to work, while my mother's sitting curled up in the warm living room reading.
Your mother was so oppressed. He's out there in freezing weather, digging the car out of the snow so he can go to work, and she's just curled up reading a book about oppression. Interesting. Oh, poor baby.
Reading a book. I mean, I just, don't see how it really was as unequal, really, yes and no, paradoxically, right?
Yeah, well, Darlene, I think that's your perspective is really interesting to me, and I've learned a lot through this discussion. I think we are planning to have you join us for a solid ground discussion, so everybody can talk about these.
All right, that's a good place to stop. We got through most of it, so that's pretty good. We got through just about all this. Well, maybe 2 or 3 minutes left. Yeah, about 2 or 3 minutes left, and that's pretty much the end of the discussion. So, yeah, she said a lot. Okay, she said a lot. So basically, as a feminist, someone who became a feminist, decided against it in their older age, looking back and saying, all that stuff that white women are talking about and being oppressed is what they call bullshit. Absolutely bullshit. And women weren't oppressed. In fact, they had it very easy. And guess who had the raw end of the stick? Guess who had the short end of the stick? It was men that had short end of the stick, because guess what her father did to support the family? He's dying of cancer, but he still has to get up, throwing up, and actually have to and go to work, okay, to support the family, while she's curled up with a book. Did she get her ass up and go to work? No. Interesting. So it sounds like they were trying to come back to because the United States can't afford a matriarchy anymore. That's why. The patriarchy, as they described it, is a myth, right? The patriarchy really died, for the most part, 1839 with the custody of infants, for the most part. Says she's waiting on the life insurance to kick in. Y'all ain't shit. Peach's patriotism going to be wild. It's cutting up. If I'm awake when it goes live. I heard that. Men work and die. Yes. Only foreign women are allowed at the table now. Yeah, well, that's true. Anyhow, y'all, let me get out of here. Okay. If you haven't given me a like, please hit the like button on your way out. Okay. This is a fairly good. Well, man, I got almost 700 people watching. Okay. Y'all better hit my like button, man. Only got 360 people liking the video. Come on, y'all. Hit that like button. Because I know you guys wanted my input on this. Hopefully we can get Dr. T and Dr. Neil to actually weigh in. I think there's another one she did. I actually want to take a clip out of it, talking about pornography from another one of her interviews. I think I was so interested in it, I think I might do a pre-recorded on there, because there's a portion of it from a black feminist about pornography, and a lot of stuff she says matches, okay, but why they want to control men's sexuality. All right, good people, I think I am out, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So what non-aristocratic males lived in any sort of real patriarchy? As it was defined, they did, okay? Because the children belong to you, even poor men, okay? On a farm, okay? The children belong to him. So it was a real, honest to God patriarchy, okay? After the custody of infants, when they couldn't keep their children, it was gone. Just please make Theo's last comment the thumbnail. I don't even know what Theo's last comment. Oh, talking about the foreign women. Thai women for the win. I like them chocolate ties, man. That's some good women. Anyhow, let's get out of here. I will see you guys tomorrow. Snowman coming on next.
What can I say? Mamba out.
Музыка Денис Шедер.